My name is Tracy Miranda, and I'm going to be talking to you about a lean design critique, or how to optimize your UX when design time is limited. Okay, so UX, that stands for user experience, and I think it's critically important in any software tools out there today. But in my experience, there's 3 myths around UX that stop developers from really focusing on it in their tools. So we're going to look at these, as well as how you can overcome these myths with the 7 steps of the lean design critique. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to give you my definition of UX. And for that, we're going to start with your product. Okay, I need you to use a bit of imagination here. So that boiled egg is your software product, and it's very feature-rich, but it's a product that lots of people want to use in the world. Then for every product, you have your users. So I don't know what your users are like, but I do know my 2-year-old in the morning when she hasn't had any breakfast, and it's not a pretty sight when she's hungry. So if I tried to feed her this egg as it is, then she would just go ballistic and would have a big meltdown because she wouldn't be able to get into it and just have a mess everywhere. And I'm sure anyone who's ever had a really bad experience with a web or mobile tools can relate. So I don't want that. I don't want a meltdown, not first thing in the morning. So I'll serve the egg to her like this. And that to me is what UX is all about. It's everything that a user uses to interact with the product. So for this, it's the plate, it's the spoon, it's the cup. It's especially the fact that I've taken the top off the egg so that she can get straight into it without any fuss. And I'll differentiate UX from user interface. Traditionally, we talked about user interfaces, and that was just the tool you use to interact with the product. But these days, we look much wider at the whole picture. So I hope you'll agree with me that UX is really important to keep your customers happy. But why is it then that we have so many tools out there which just have really, just not great UX? So my experience talking to developers, I keep running into sort of the same 3 things over and over again. And I call these the UX myths. So first myth is, well, UX is a design job. It's all about best practices like picking the right icons, colors, or fonts. And most developers say, well, I do code, I don't do art. It's a job for someone who knows what goes well with blue. Okay. Second myth, well, UX is all about delighting your users. So it's more for web and mobile apps. And this whole notion that UX is to do with Apple products, it's just in that domain. So to this I'll say, well, we certainly see a lot of user experience talked about in the space of mobile and apps. It's becoming more and more relevant to all tools in every domain. And users are getting particularly, they're getting high standards about what they expect from their tools. Okay, so the third one is it's expensive and time-consuming, and we don't really have a budget for doing things like usability testing and focus groups. So that one tends to be quite a hard one to argue with because you always have to balance business case with user experience. Okay, I lied. There's an extra myth, and I hear this from time to time as well, that, well, Eclipse IDE is just too complicated and cluttered, so I'm going to blame Eclipse. I can't do anything because what's the point of optimizing my bit of the tool when you've got the whole of Eclipse to deal with? And we're going to come back to these myths later and just I'll give you, whether there's any truth in them or not. So with this in mind, I'm still pretty, passionate about getting good user experiences in all tools and making things efficient and saving people time. So that's where a lean design critique came about. And it's a 7-step technique to get the most worthwhile optimizations in a short space of time, particularly for complex software tool flows. And there's a particular sweet spot where I'll tend to use it on my projects, is when you have an existing software tool, but the clients ask, hey, can we add some new features in? Can we enhance the functionality, maybe fix a few bugs while we're at it? But of course, time is limited. They need it done yesterday. They need it done as soon as possible. But in the middle of those, when you have those three conditions, that's always a case where I'll try to apply this technique. So to really illustrate it, we're going to look at a case study and of how it was applied for tools in the science sector. And the client in particular is Diamond Light Source. Now they are, it's a synchrotron which is in the middle of the UK countryside. It's perhaps not as well known as CERN, but still they do some really groundbreaking research there. And it's for very, very practical things. So you've got flu viruses or dinosaur bones or the human eye or even chocolate. So lots of good research coming out of there. And to analyze all this research, they have a tool called Dawn, which stands for Data Analysis Workbench. And incidentally, Dawn is now becoming an Eclipse project, so that will be available in open source as Eclipse, and it's just going through the proposal phase at the moment, so watch out for that. But Dawn is used to analyze the results from lots and lots of experiments. You have things like tomography or crystallography. So it can be really, really complex, especially when you've got new users coming in and using it for the first time. In particular, we're going to look at a tool called the function fitting tool. Now, at a very high level, don't worry, I'm not going to get into the science of it, but users will have some data and they'll know they'll be looking for a line or a curve from that data. And they'll know that there's an equation that goes with these, but they just need the number. So a line, we know, is mx plus c. So what is the value for m and what is the value for c? So they use this tool methodically to kind of work out what are the magic numbers that they need to get on to the next stage of their project. So for a line, it's m and c. For a curve, it might be the a, b, and c values that plug into that formula. So that's the tool we were looking at. And this is what it looks like in its natural environment. You've got the plot on this side, and over here, this is the table side. Now that side, that part of the tool wasn't up for grabs. We weren't going to change anything about that. But we were going to look at this part. And in particular, the client wanted to add some hierarchy and some ability to have some expressions to make it more powerful. We weren't going to look at UX at all, or rather, it wasn't on the brief. But once I started working on it, I just couldn't help myself. We had to find a way that we could improve some of the usability issues from the tool. Okay, so we went through these 7 steps, and I'll go through each one in detail and tell you exactly what we did and how we did it. Okay, so the first step for your tool is to identify the 90% task. So I'll state that for every tool, 90% of users spend 90% of the time doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the trick is really to define that task at the right resolution, not too high level and not in too much detail. And that gives you the core, the real essence of why does that tool even exist in the world. So with Diamond Light Source, what we did, first of all, we talked to the product manager. The product manager knows what the tool is intended for. And then we just spoke to one key user, and that was a beamline scientist who was used to using the tool every day and seeing new people come in and use the tool. Now, there's really good research out there that says you don't really need to ask more than 5 people, to use your tool, what they use for. You get the most benefit out of just 1 or 2, and I'll have a look at that link. It's really interesting work. If you pick the right users, just 1 or 2 will give you sort of your biggest optimizations or tell you the most about your tool that you need to know. So we asked them, well, what is the tool used for? 90% of the time. And it might seem obvious that they came back and said, well, it's function fitting. But it's important then to go deeper than that. And so we said, well, what is it used for the rest of the time? And for each element, we sort of looked at it and said, well, how often is that used? And how often is that used? And we were able to establish that the tool had some things like importing and exporting fitting data or changing the accuracy that people did very rarely. So we don't count those in the 90% task. Okay, step 2 is do a cognitive walkthrough. This is where you break down the 90% task step by step, and you perform the task exactly as a user would. So you put yourself in your user's shoes. So we did that with the tool, and we came up with these 7 steps. And it's really important that you agree on these steps, and they cover the main things, because all the rest of this flow will be optimizing this. So whatever you decide is the main task, you're going to have a tool that's optimized for that. So you really want to get that right. We'll go into this in more detail, so I'm not going to read them out. Okay, then step 3 is to analyze clicks or something measurable. I'm going to share a little story. So when I was in my first job, I used to work for an embedded company. And embedded companies, I don't know if anyone here has done some embedded tools, but they're really notorious for having just terrible, terrible, terrible user experience. The users are expected to get the tools from one place and the tool chain from somewhere else, and they have to get the documentation for the board from a third place, figure out how to write it, and then download it onto the hardware. So we were one of those companies where, we thought, well, people have to use the chip. They don't really have a choice. We don't have to worry about the software. But we started doing a new project, and it was based on Eclipse IDE. And the manager at the time turned around and said, well, everybody, we're going to do this project, and we're going to make it work in 3 clicks for the user. So they're going to have the IDE open, and they're going to get their program downloaded onto the board in 3 clicks. Okay, and we thought at first that he'd been out in the sun too long, or maybe had a bit too much to drink, because, the flow took ages and ages and ages. But we were up for the challenge. So we started going through and optimizing different paths, and the aim was to remove friction. So we got to a point where we had it down to 6 clicks, and we were really pleased with ourselves. It was like, oh, look at all the stuff we've done. We've put in defaults, we've optimized certain things, and we've made it really, really easy for the user. But he was pretty adamant, we're going to do it in 3 steps. And we did get there. So within Eclipse, the first click was the user would press the new project wizard, take the defaults, and second click was to press finish. And third click was to click download, which would automatically build and would download to the default board. And they would have hello world on this new hardware architecture. And even though in that case we only optimized for one flow for this default board, the work we did applied to the rest of the product and made it a better user experience in general. So the point here is that you want to pick something measurable, and you want to stick with that value. And it depends what, it might be mouse clicks, it might be length of time, it might be number of pages. What's important is that you stick with it. So for Diamond's case, we picked mouse clicks and mouse travel. And we went through the steps one by one. So first step, click auto refit, 1 click. Second step, we realized we had to get the user to click on the row and then come halfway down the tool to select which function they wanted. So instantly, by step 2, they're already up to 3 clicks. And we could see things like we're expecting them to find a box which was in the middle of the page, not the most intuitive page, a place for someone to look, especially when they're new to a tool. So one of the things we did was we weren't afraid to draw conclusions as we went along. We're doing this really on a tight budget. So make those decisions as you see something that's really glaring out for fixing. So they would change the parameters, set the value there, that 50, have a look to see if it looked right on the plot. If it wasn't right, then they would go through that loop again. They would click up there, and then they would change the number. And you can see that was quite a long path of clicking and changing, clicking and changing. And finally, when they were finished, they would accept the data by clicking on that arrow there. And you might also notice that it's a tiny arrow hidden in a row of icons, really hard to find given how important it was. Okay, on to step 4, analyze screen space usage. So the principle here is that the GUI elements should be proportional to the importance that they have, such that they draw attention to themselves appropriately. And basically, the 90% task gets the prime real estate. So we looked at the tool, and instantly we could see a couple of areas where there were bits that people just didn't use that often. And so it's like, well, can we get rid of them? They're right at the top of the tool. They draw you in with their eyes, but people are changing them once in a blue moon. Let's put them somewhere else. Let's hide them in some preferences. Okay, so we're on to step 5. Step 5 is explore existing designs. So the idea here is don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Have a look at what else is out there and how other tools solve the problem. So in Diamond's case, we asked ourselves some questions like, well, how would Eclipse do this? Or how would the rest of the tools do this? Is anyone else doing something similar? And we didn't in this case, but you might also want to ask yourself, well, how's it done on a mobile phone or perhaps in a website? And look for those paradigms that people are already used to using. In this case, we're looking for a table which would support multiple entries with support for hierarchy. And we came across this table in Eclipse. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. That's, yeah, let's see if you nod. It's the expression table from the debug perspective. And yeah, that was quite a nice paradigm because we thought if we match that, then all of a sudden people who are used to using Eclipse debug are going to be quite familiar with our tool. Step 6 is optimize. So you've got your analysis and you've got your research. You put that together and you actually do your coding. And you can do this while you're adding in your new features. And for good measure, we had this checklist. And the checklist was something we just kept in the front of our minds to see, well, are we hitting some key points? Like how efficient is it to use? How's, is the system status visible? What's the aesthetic like? And as a result, we came up with our new design. So you can see, similar to the expressions view, and but we've got our system status up there, nice and prominent. We have our buttons easily available. And the really nice thing where you could just click in one place and select and edit, view and edit all in one place. So the final step is you just close that loop by rerunning your analysis to sort of see, well, what is the measurable improvement you've made here? So we did that and we went through all our steps again. And this time we sort of came up with just 4 clicks for all the different stages. And we put that side by side with the original one. And you could see the difference just in the mouse travel for the original versus the new one and in the number of clicks. So there we had some real measurable improvements which we could take to the project manager and say, look, this is the difference we've made. So yeah, we're pretty pleased with that. Okay, so those are the steps of the lean design critique. Another point I really like to emphasize is, although I've got them here all sort of equal size, if you were to take that and put it in the context of, well, how long does it take, or how long did it take us? I think this is more realistic, that at the end of the day, most of the work is happening here in the optimize, where you're actually writing the code, you're testing the code, and you're doing corner cases and good coding and everything. And all the rest of it can really be done in relatively short space of time. So if you're adding in new features anyway, and you're going to be rewriting the code, why not just do those steps as well? Focus a bit on the user's point of view and get that thrown in. So it's kind of that low add-on to your whole process of sort of refactoring or adding in new things. Okay, so this seems like a good point to throw in a Steve Jobs quote, where he says, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like, but design is how it works. It's that combination of function and form." Okay, so we're going to look back at our myths now. So, is it a design job all about best practices like picking color? Well, no, I say it's a process, and it's got rules and guidelines and measurable outcomes. Sure, things like design help, but at the end of the day, it's something which, any technically minded person can apply these rules. It's sort of pseudoscience, and you can get real measurable outcomes. Is it all about delighting your user and web and mobile? Well, I say no. It's all about putting yourself in your user's shoes and looking at your tool from their perspective and seeing what they care about. And what about to the people who say it's expensive and time-consuming? So for those I say, well, get started with the lean design critique and build up from there. But lean design critique is just a low entry way to get some UX improvements. And what about Eclipse? Okay, well, I believe Eclipse is at a tipping point when it comes to UX. And one of the things with E4, developers have much more control about how they present their tools to the end user. And we're starting to see lots of tools come out of Eclipse that don't necessarily look like Eclipse or have very simplified interfaces. And I'll also highlight some initiatives from members of the CDT community, the Eclipse community. But in particular, Doug Schaefer, who's former head of CDT and also one of the wise elders in the CDT community. And he's got a page up about UX matters and some initiatives that are ongoing. So definitely check that out and get involved with some of the cool things like the launch bar and toolbar filtering, which really focus on this idea of keeping everything really nice and optimized for the user. Okay, so we all know what happy users look like. They've got a smile on their face, they've used our product, they go away, but they come back again and again for more. And so good UX, I say, is really worthwhile, and it is achievable by you. So I hope you all feel empowered to go out and spread some good UX and make the world a more efficient place. Thank you.